Well, welcome to a new initiative from Turf Business TV. We're joined today by David Snowden from Agronomic Services. Hello, David.
Hi.
And Andy Gray from Southampton FC. Morning, Andy.
Hi, Martin.
And we're going to carry out something now called Ask the Consultant. So essentially, we're going to be looking at some issues, potentially those that have come up around coronavirus and the lack of availability of certain things and resources. And cover some topics that perhaps are helpful to people out there in the wider industry. Before we do that, Andy, though, can we just have a little chat about you and how you're dealing with things down there at Southampton? Firstly, for those people that don't know who you are and what you're looking after there, what's the kind of resource that you're managing down there?
At Southampton Football Club, we maintain 3 sites, which consist of St Mary's Stadium, Staplewood Training Ground, and off-site pitch at AFC Totton, where our women's team play, and we started to play under 23s fixtures there as well. Across the whole team, we have 16 people, which is essentially 13 ground staff, 2 landscape gardeners, and myself. I have 3 people at St Mary's, 1 at Totton, and then the rest of the guys will work out at Staplewood. Obviously, St Mary's is 1 pitch, Totton is 1 pitch, and Staplewood, consists of 9 grass pitches, of which 5 are full size. The other 4 are smaller academy pitches, and we have 2 full size artificial pitches. We carry out essentially all works ourselves. The only thing we can't do is the corrowing off of the pitches in renovation time. Don't have our own corral, unfortunately, yet, but we have everything else to enable us to do all our work for the rest of the year, and all the rest of the renovation works we carry out ourselves as well. So in a nutshell, that's who we are and what we've got.
And I guess things are a bit different currently as we're in the middle of lockdown. Big impact on your team? Are you having to totally reorganise?
Yeah, it's not too bad. All 3 sites have been shut down. There's nobody playing football. St Mary's is still a little bit up in the air in terms of if they'll come back, when they come back, obviously for the whole of the rest of the country. Likewise, the training ground. So at the moment, we're just maintaining the pitches through. We haven't renovated anything yet. We have had confirmation that the women's season's finished and Totton Southern League Division 1 season has finished. So we do have plans in place to renovate that pitch in May time. Obviously, still not done it yet. Of our 16 staff, I've currently got 7 people coming into site essentially every other day just to cut pitches, feed them, essentially keep them alive. And we are predominantly, they're on their own sites, but we are swapping sites about to keep the amount of people down as much as possible who's coming into work, basically. And I'm also trying to do it where people live. If they live close to a certain site, that's where they go.
So you're keeping them safe. How's morale?
Yeah, it's good actually. Yeah,
not you personally, perhaps, but the team.
Yeah, for mine, the hardest bit is telling the people that can't come to work not to come to work, rather than asking people to come in. It's not nice saying you can't come to work basically because everyone wants to. So that's the hardest bit. But apart from that, everyone's good. And it also obviously helps when the sun comes back out like it has done the last week or so, especially if you've got a garden.
Well, let's hope you're through this and safe and well. Whenever we are through it, it's sounding like it might go on for a little while yet. So fingers crossed it all kind of works itself out. What did you want to discuss with David then in terms of this kind of ask the consultant or this discussion that you're going to have about helping maybe other people around the industry?
It's more obviously in terms of the current situation we're in. Everyone is obviously unprecedented times. No one's ever experienced it before. The last thing that ever happened that was remotely similar was the Second World War, which most of us obviously weren't around for. And the world was a completely different place back then anyway. So if it was the start of the season, middle of the season, again, maybe not too much, but where we are end of season, renovation time, which essentially is the most important time of the season for everybody, it's getting those ideas and suggestions of what could we do if we can't renovate, basically. So yeah, my sort of questions were centered around that. So I suppose the first, sorry, go on, David.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, so my first central question would be what are the best in-house cultural methods that we could do ourselves instead of renovating if we're unable to do so? If we have pieces of kit in the shed, or could we hire them in, things like that?
Exactly. Yeah, no, great point. I think one of the most important things, if we can't renovate to the degree of corrowing, and this goes down all the way down every league, whether it's rugby league, football, is having the ability to what you would class as physical beating the grass up and removing as much as you can, whether it's a scarification to a really, really quite an aggressive way. So you're taking out a lot of rubbish, and you and I both know that most of the problem lies in the top 20 mil of whether it's a bit of black layer or a bit of algae, dead matter, etc. And as much of that we can physically remove if you have the capability. That's one aspect. The second aspect, if you can't renovate, there's now chemicals that we can put in and spray that break down using enzymes that break down the organic matter. The two aspects, very much physical aspect of trying to remove as much dead matter as you are capable of doing, whether it's a brush or whether it's a rake, whether it's a scarifier, and that goes down for any league, etc., to remove as much rubbish as possible. And then a case of you and I both know if we can stick a tine in the ground to whatever depth we can do and get some heat on there, we're dealing, again, there's two aspects, in a high sand content, low CC root zone, that's slightly different to a Sunday league pitch where it's probably clay. And so, but if we could get in there with a tine and do our physical work where normally on a golf course or on a football pitch wouldn't want to do it because of play. So we're coming stage back before full renovation. Yet if you can stick tines in the ground, you don't actually have to remove it, but you can scarify the surface and break that, or you can hollow core if it's not a hybrid pitch and take a remove a little bit. So there's very much, and I think what would be great from our standpoint is coming out with a little sort of mini packages for full renovation, mini renovation, sort of, and scarification. Then it'll bring it back to how you overseed and then what you put, what amendments you might put in to then create a seed bed you can bring back. And a lot of it has got to do with irrigation as well, hasn't it? If people have good irrigation, then that's obviously a big difference because you can influence seed germination, etc.
Absolutely, yeah. Because you renovate for two primarily reasons. One is to keep the wheatgrasses out, and second, like you say, as you just touched on, to keep the surface as clean as possible for the drainage and filtration rates off through the surface. Yeah. So the two biggest issues that we'd face if we weren't able to do anything much. And you just touched upon
you can go down a chemical route, and as I can say, this is not a sales meeting. This is a discussion where that is available, and there are situations where we can mine the organic matter and break it down, and the thatch, etc. If there's any excess there, and dissolve black layer. Yes, we still need a bit of aeration, but we can do it chemically. That is a bit of a saving grace down that road.
Okay.
If we can't physically do it, and then which I think this probably leads directly onto one of your other questions. I think it was with reference to nutrition. Everything's a bit on its head, whether it's a golf green or whether it's a football. And as you say, we're coming towards the end of a season, and if we put a bag of fertilizer out there, you've lost control. And so putting units of N out through a bag of fertilizer, I'm not beating up granular fertilizer, but you lost control now. My desire, and I've spoken to a lot of people about this, is very much go down the foliar route, which means you're putting on 1 to 2 to 3 kilos of N onto the leaf just to maintain nitrogen management, but then you're putting all the goodies in there, the amino acids, vitamins and minerals, etc. So we're turning it on its head a little bit. We're on maintenance, and so if you put down what we would normally put on units wise of N to keep the thing going, because we've got players there and we're beating it up, you flip that on its head and come all the way back to say, well, I can manage this turf by just spoon feeding it with what I call true foliar feeding, which is sort of 150 litres to 300 litres total spray volume with the material left on the leaf.
Yeah.
And I think,
because there's like you say that because our job, I've said to a few people in recent weeks that our job is essentially broken down into 3 parts of preparing, repairing, and maintaining.
Yeah.
If you take away the user, we're not preparing for anything and we're not repairing from anything. So we are just maintaining.
Sure.
And that's exactly what you've just said then. So yeah.
And I think
you're right.
We're designed to put on kilos of nitrogen because we've got to get growth, and we wanted to get growth, and we have other amendments that you put on, but now we're reining that back. And someone mentioned, we're going to talk about this in probably another one, but someone mentioned about growth regulators. Well, my argument is if you're going to have to use a growth regulator, you're putting too much nitrogen on.
Yeah.
Or the circumstances allow it too much growth.
I suppose
so you're reining it back.
Yeah. The only thing with growth regulator at the moment is if you can't get on site or your visits to site are limited, then yes, obviously that is an option. But if you're doing it because you can't keep on top of it, then absolutely, it's certain products that you put on would be for the end user in terms of whether it's football, golf, rugby, horse racing, anything.
Oh, sure.
No one's using that turf, so it was. Can you cut down on what you're using? And
yeah,
you've already answered that. So.
And if you're mowing,
money saving.
More normally you'd be mowing every day, and now you're probably mowing once every 3 days, once every 4 days. There's a bit of a guideline that's come out, but again, if the days are getting longer, so our degrees of days growth is more. The nitrogen, the soils are warming up, so we're getting more release anyway, and it's one of those situations where we want to just try and rein back on that. And again, I can't stress enough that you've got foliar feeding, soil liquids, and granulars. Yeah. And in the combination of all 3, when we've got a full season, we're bashing on with all of them.
Absolutely.
You can nearly remove 2 at the moment and just stick with what I class as true foliar feeding.
Just the maintenance, absolutely, yeah.
Which is the maintenance, yeah.
And then, you touched upon the chemicals that could be used for the sort of thatch control.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we can use for power infestation? Because that would probably start to come in the summer, but certainly come autumn time, that could really hit if we're unable to renovate.
You see, that's the biggest single problem, because full renovation takes out the seeds that are already in the soil.
Yes.
And so we're always going to have a residual percentage of seeds in that root zone that start coming through 2/3 of the way through the season, so we don't see them. And as well as I do, if we try and rip and rake and everything and scarify, we can get rid of a certain amount, but unfortunately there still isn't the chemicals apart from the Roundup type material where we kill a lot. And so full scarification of removal and verticutting and that type of thing, where you do on a golf green, to the degree that you've nearly corrowed but you haven't removed any soils, you're going to get rid of an awful lot of seed heads. But you and I both know, when you've got a lovely sward and it's looking pretty, October time, guess what?
Bang,
start rearing their ugly head again.
No, indeed, because I've always had the argument that if you don't remove them all, if you're just thinning out, then you also run the risk of just spreading what's there. Yeah. You can remove some, but you won't remove all, and then what you do leave, you could spread unwittingly yourself by raking, thinning, scarifying, etc. So
that's it. And again, there's a situation where if people have got the ability to use a growth regulator, the certain ones, get them at the certain time early enough, then you prevent a power leaving its vegetative state and going into a flowering state. And so if you can get it before it goes into a flowering state and keep it as a vegetative state, then that might help. It certainly helped the reduction, but I mean that's now, isn't it? We've got seed head production's already started pretty much, but if we can get something on prior, and you've got the win-win situation of potentially using a growth regulator to slow the speed down, and then it's less cutting and also reduce seed head production, then the plants won't go into the stress mode of reduction.
No, indeed. So the infestation of the POA as well links into what you just mentioned just now about the fertilizer, the units of N. If you can keep that down as well, that will help.
Yeah.
And the irrigation, if you can keep that down to a minimum, those two things as well as
Correct.
things that would encourage
that
infestation. So
there's a bit of
all
cultural
links together.
Yeah, a bit of physical and a bit of cultural practice, but there isn't, as you and I both know, there isn't anything chemically on the market realistically that gets rid of it without getting rid of the other grasses as well.
No, absolutely no. So that'll be going forward for next year.
I think so. Yeah. Again, and so you've got an aspect of thatch management and organic matter management, and again, I say there are specific chemicals on the market that address that problem, and so that's a little bit to do with infiltration rates and organic matter buildup. Then they can be managed chemically, which is one saving grace. After, if someone can't physically scarify and beat up the grass, beat up the top 15 mil, much they can do.
Yeah, without, so you said it's not been a sales pitch. Can you give some examples of some products that could be used for the control of these things?
Well, in the golf industry, where they can't physically beat up the green, with thatch management has been used, and again, it's an enzyme-based type problem. It's not bacteria; it's enzymes that you put in, spray out, and the cellulose, a bit like a fly spitting on its food. It's using organic acids and enzymes, and it breaks down the food and then drinks it. Well, these materials, these liquids, enzymes get sprayed out and they start digesting the cellulose, which is a bit of a win-win, because in the cellulose it's organic matter and it's food. Yeah. And so you can actually use that as a bit of a food source. We know we can measure in the top 20 mil of a root zone, and you can have 20 to 30 kilos of residual nitrogen there. You stick a tine in the ground or it gets warmed up, then that starts breaking through. Well, then you can manage that with, and this has been done on golf courses for a number of years. And it's actually now more of a cultural way of managing it. Whereas, in a football side of things, you can go in there and beat the surface up, start again. Well, on a golf green, you can't do that.
No, it's probably, you make a good point. I suppose, like you say, football pitches are taken out for a period of the summer, whereas golf courses are never taken out. They're always in play. So it's a very good point that maybe look at the route that the golf guys go down.
We've done this
that they undertake.
We've done this on a couple of pitches where it's been more of the training pitches, really, rather than a stadium pitch.
Yeah.
To training pitches where they're not going to get renovated and cored off. Actually, you do a set of a soil analysis, and you can identify the residual nitrogen in there, and then you can actually start mining that through the grain season, and you use that organic matter and thatch, etc., and use it as a food source, and very quickly you can get rid of sort of 50, 60, 70% through a growing period of what the residual crap that might be there.
Yeah, we had a bit of an experiment ourselves about 3 years ago with some what we call a biological renovation.
Yeah.
And we were planning on doing it again this year as another trial.
Yeah.
And because of the situation, we're definitely doing it on two of our academy pitches. Sure. It's a perfect opportunity to do so. So
yeah. I mean, the Americans have been doing it for a long time. They use a product called Thatch Buster, which is a specific product. But I think you've got to remember that in the sort of the management, and the owners have to remember that renovation, this is the high end, renovation is still the best way forward. And if they, you and I don't want to be sat here having a conversation and then someone says, and the owner of such and such place turns around and says, well, we don't need to spend 200,000 renovating that because you've just said that we can manage it chemically. Yeah, well, that's not the right, the ultimate at a high end level is renovation. We know that. And then going all the way down the line, if you get to a situation where you can't renovate, we have to do the physical aeration practices, but then there are chemical practices to make sure that the root zone, it works at its efficiency, at its high efficiency.
Yeah, you could term it as like a gold, silver, bronze package, couldn't you?
Well,
whereas the gold one is the growing off, and then the silver, your own works, and the bronze, the products and the chemical
And a
I
guy,
suppose.
you know, I think Andy, with reference to even the guys down the chain, right down the chain, if someone can hire in, or they've got a bloody great rake and they can rip the surface to shreds, you know, and then they can come in and they know they can spend a couple of thousand on some chemical thatch management through the season, you know, and aerate it and then come back and put a light dressing on and some seed. Well, they're going to go an awful long way of producing a bit of a surface again.
Absolutely.
Our biggest problem is when, you know, we've had 6 months of rain and nearly a metre of rain, and then it goes dry.
Nothing, just stopped.
Exactly. And so, you know, you end up with a squidgy algae surface that we've tried to get rid of.
I suppose as well, the lower leagues, I say lower leagues, the non-league, should I say, whereas where we'd normally do full renovation anyway, you could, even you're coming into June, July, start of pre-season, etc.
Yeah.
It's still your growing season, obviously, bang in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So there's no reason why you can't do little and often, even once the season's restarted again, I suppose.
Absolutely.
In terms of continue with your raking, a little bit of dressing, seeding, etc. So it doesn't have to be now when we're in complete lockdown. It can be when things start to get a bit more back to normal, which at the moment, who knows when, but hopefully June, July. So
I think a decision has to be made of what percentage of pitches get renovated to what degree.
Yeah.
And I think that can be done on a bespoke, you dig up an area and see what the state of that pitch is and where its compaction is, etc. And then, you know, a bit like on a golf course again, whether it's a golf green or a fairway or a tee, you aerate to the depth of where the bit of the compaction is and alleviate that the best you can, and just scarify the surface. And then, you know, again, in your environment, these pure high sand content pitches have very little life.
Yeah.
Very little inverted commas organic matter there.
Indeed.
They've got very low CECs, which is the holding capacity, Martin, of the soil. Its ability to hold on to nutrients. These pure high sand hybrid pitches are very free draining. However, when it comes to renovation, you want the seed to go into an environment where it can germinate, which 99% of all seed germinates fantastically.
Yeah.
All we're bothered about is establishment.
Indeed, yeah.
Does it die in the first three weeks, or does it survive?
Yeah.
And that, you know as well as I do, there's lots of amendments now been put into renovation time, whether it's through other specific agronomists, you know, PhDs, etc. There's the specs that you can put out there, that you put in, you know, these humic acids with bacteria in them that's got life immediately there. I think the cultural and biological materials should play a bigger part in our future.
Yes, generally.
We should change that. Whatever this horrendous virus has done, and there's an awful lot of people out there that, hats off, and they're fighting the cause, etc. We should change our mindset a little bit about how we manage our turf. I know we're under huge pressure to produce the most beautiful surface and sky, etc., and all of that side of it, but we've gone down the road of where someone's been putting on 1,200 units of N or 1,500 units of N, and I've got them down to 500 to 600 units of N in a season by making that root zone work better.
Yes.
And so that has to be a good thing, and that is where it's a huge money-saving exercise. But we're managing and making the root zones more efficient at their job through other materials, etc.
No, indeed. I mean, that's another approach that we've been trying to follow the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
It's simply putting a healthy soil as a healthy plant.
Of course it is.
And you're feeding the soil as much as you're feeding the plant, if not more so. And I agree that, say, this summer, this situation is the perfect opportunity for people to, you know, to have a bash at that, basically.
Sure.
And whereas you might not want to normally, you might not want to go against the grain, but this summer has given you the perfect opportunity to do so. So if next season things aren't as pristine as they had been the last 10 years or so, we're always learning all the time. And you know, if something isn't quite as good, then you can always look back to this summer and think that it wasn't a normal summer, so we did what we could. And as long as you learn from it, it's not a wasted opportunity or time spent. So
agreed.
Like you say, the in terms of the seed, we'll feed our soils with microbes on a 2 weekly basis. anyway.
Yeah.
When we seed, we put some mycorrhizae down with it.
Yep.
We sometimes covered with germination sheets, sometimes not. I don't think we're going to this year. Again, just to see if there's anything different with it.
And again, that's a fine balance. You know, germination mats are fine, but we don't want to grow rhubarb.
No, indeed.
You know, for a couple of days to get the things germinating is one thing.
Yeah.
But then we can crack on, and you know, again, this is where I bark back and go. Foliar feeding by putting a small amount of baby food on the leaf, the plant can take it, and until it's big enough to take a full bowl of pasta, a bag of fertilizer, then you know we need to just be gentle with it.
No, and there's only sort of two reasons why we would germinate sheets, because it does make it establish quicker in the first 2 to 3 weeks, but you come to week 4 and there's no difference anyway.
No.
So the two main reasons why we've used it the last couple of years is to stop the pigeons eating it.
Okay.
And the spread, once you irrigate, whether it's raining or your irrigation system, it's just a spread of the water hitting the sheet and then dispersing through the sheet, rather than those droplets of water banging on the ground, basically. So
interesting.
But apart from that, yeah.
Two side benefits for something that's
yeah. Because the long term, honestly, after week 4, there is no benefit of a pitch that has been sheeted compared to one that hasn't. You come to week 4, and there's no difference.
Sure.
It's just those first 2 to 3 weeks that it's slightly further on. But
yeah, I know someone wanted to ask me a question about synthetics versus organics. You know, organic fertilizers compared with synthetic fertilizers, and again. In an environment where organic fertilizer gets put down, it's quite demanding on the microflora. But if you've got a good microflora, a good bacteria, they work well. And then there's various chemicals on the market that increase bacteria's activity. So if you've already got some residual organic product already up there on the ground, it will last longer.
Yes.
So the use of an organic product and then certain chemicals that were like I was talking about, again, I'm not going to go there, but rocks, which is your thatch busters, that work with organic product and your foliage, you end up with a far more switched on root zone compared with 1,200 units of synthetic fertilizer.
I agree. Yeah.
And I don't want to cause a complete hate mail version for me with different people that sell granular fertilizer, but this is a perfect opportunity for us to manage our root zones better.
No, I agree.